Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Muslim Vibe podcast. Today I'm speaking with Dustin Craun, who is a creative strategist and community organizer based here in California. And Dustin has basically a very vast experience of starting from academia right through to digital content publication and stuff. And he's essentially worked with so many different organizations and Muslim artists and producers and creators. So I thought it'd be a really good time to organize a podcast with him to talk about the creative space for Muslims and also the emergence of NFTs, blockchain, crypto, all of that stuff, and how that kind of corresponds with Muslim artists and Muslim creatives. So we kind of have a deep dive discussion about what NFTs are, what their value is, all of that kind of more technical kind of side of things, and then we discuss what the future looks like for Muslims in the NFT space, and we also look at some examples of Muslims that are currently doing amazing work in the NFT space. So yeah, it's just a really kind of mind-opening conversation. As mentioned in my previous podcast, guys, we are going to be talking a lot more about metaverse, NFTs, blockchain, cryptocurrency, all of this kind of stuff, because it is that important. And we want to kind of make sure that the Muslim community is benefiting from being aware and understanding how these things work and how they can potentially be solutions, but also challenges for us in the future, and how we can, as a community, collectively work to make the most of this new opportunity. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Dustin Craun. Assalamu alaikum, Dustin. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. Great. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I'm really, long-time fan of the Muslim Vibe. I think we featured you in one of our global Muslim startup lists way back in the day, maybe 2016, 2017 era.
That's right. I remember that. I remember that vividly. So do you want to just tell us a little bit, because you just mentioned the list as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Center for Global Muslim Life?
Sure. So, this is all work that I've been doing for a long time, really around narrative change, changing the story around Muslims and telling social impact stories about Muslims around the world. And so I've done that with my work, founding Empower Change with Linda Sarsour, through the work we used to do with Wide, which was my first company. And now that work has shifted to the Center for Global Muslim Life, which is a nonprofit based here in California. I'm in Southern California. And with that, we continued a lot of the work that we were doing with Wide, but we also have expanded the work, ranging from the work we do here at the U.S.-Mexico border, which we call the Border Mosque, to what was the 50 global Muslim startup list has turned into the 100 global Muslim startup list that we're publishing for the first time in 4 years today, this week, inshallah. And then also we have a global Muslim impact forum. We have a global Muslim film festival, and why do I use the term global so much, right? Because I converted to Islam in Colorado in 2002. And so my entire time as a Muslim has been in the context of this war on terror, where, a lot of the goal of the war on terror has been to police our identities, get us to be American Muslims, British Muslims, Australian Muslims, Malaysian Muslims, etc., and not talk about the Ummah, not talk about our solidarity as global Muslims around the world. And actually, if you think about it, most of humanity doesn't think about the world. And so to have a community that's told in our holy scripture that we are protectors of the earth and humankind, we're leaders to humanity, to tell us that we can't talk about who we are globally, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's one of our gifts that the Muslims are given. And so, alhamdulillah, and I've lived into that, right? I've lived all over the world within Muslim communities.
One of the things that strikes me about yourself as an individual, but also like the organizations and stuff that you've been part of, there seems to be a lot of focus on like Muslim creatives, right? Like creating content, films, production, and so on and so forth. Do you mind like sharing with our viewers like a little bit of background as to like why that's like a soft spot for you, why that's something you care about so much?
Sure. Well, I started really in academia, and I was going deep down the rabbit hole, so to say, of of intellectual Islam and Sufism and traditionalism, and living in Berkeley, California, studying at Zaytuna College, while also hanging out with all these professors of decoloniality like Ramon Gross-Fugel and Louis Gordon and Enrique Dussel and the great masters of. I'm studying with some masters of Islam while and Sufism, while also studying with the masters of decoloniality. And so I worked on this paper for many years, and you can find it online, called Decolonizing the Heart. And it's a very dense, and I read it now and I'm like, I don't even believe I wrote that. I can barely read it myself now, right? And so after years of research and then getting the thing published in an academic journal, alhamdulillah, it was a great honor to do that. But I had a realization that I wanted to speak to more people than the couple thousand that might read that article, right? And so that's really where I personally got interested in the idea of publishing and creating more popular forms of media, filmmaking. And I've always been into film, but I think filmmaking is one of those things for most people where you don't think that it's accessible, you don't think that it's possible. But then if you're a writer, and really that's where I came out of, was being a writer and a community organizer. That was always the way I made money, the way I worked, the type of work I was involved in. If you're a writer, you can learn how to write different ways. You can learn how to write like an academic. You can learn how to write a script. And so that was the big thing for me as a writer, is just learning how to write for different audiences and learning how to write different ways.
One of the things that I guess we wanted to discuss was the future for Muslim creatives, because me and you are part of like a Discord server group chat thing, specifically around like Muslims in the metaverse. And in previous episodes, I've discussed with guests about the future of the metaverse and what that means for Muslims and stuff. Based on your kind of experience, obviously doing global Muslim life, and like interacting with Muslim creatives across the US, but also around the world, how do you see the recent kind of like shift, let's say, towards this metaverse and NFT based reality?
I had to light some oud for this conversation. Excuse me.
So that was the rustling noise, if anyone heard it.
Yeah, that was.
And now there's smoke.
Yeah, now there's
coming
smoke.
out of the screen.
It's the halal smoke, friends. It's the halal smoke. Don't worry. We are in Southern California, but it's the halal kind of smoke. Anyway, yeah, no, that it's deep, man. I think I've gone off a bit of a deep end with the NFT thing, and I think a big part of it is actually separating like cryptocurrency. There's layers, right? There's blockchain,
Yeah,
and what blockchain is as a technology, and as a technology that we know is going to be a foundational piece of technology moving forward. Then there's cryptocurrency, which I think is still up in the air, right? I think it's undecided because there's so much power involved with creating currency, and the powers that be have never allowed global governments and to create their own currency, right? Gaddafi was murdered for a reason when he tried to create a currency in Africa, right? And not just Gaddafi, but the African Union had been talking about its own currency for a very long time. Has it ever manifested? No. And so will a currency be allowed to be put in place that could potentially move the dollar off of its pedestal? They don't even want the renminbi or any of these other currencies, to take the place of the dollar. So why would they want crypto to do that? And then there's NFTs, right? And so I actually think right now, if people were so bullish on crypto in 2021, and then now we're seeing, huge course correction, and part of that being investors and governments and other things tinkering with it and making sure that price doesn't get close to $100,000, where things would really go crazy and could really move some of the global currency pieces. You have to separate NFTs from that. And so NFTs being like kind of the future of contracts, right? And I think like I've heard people explain like watches is a really good case study, right? That there's a lot of forgery in watches. They're a very expensive thing. How simple is it to create an NFT for every watch to make sure that the thing is actually real, right? And that NFT is tied. There's a way that you tell how that NFT is tied to that specific watch. So there's tons of real life possibility for NFTs. There's tons of contractual possibilities for NFTs, and then clearly there's big implications for artists as well. And then and then within that, I think there's layers. One is artists who are just trying to make some money, and maybe there's no utility to what their NFTs are. And then there's these very deep NFTs that have real world utility or have like metaverse type of utility. And those are the things that will be really successful. And then I think the other one that's going to be successful and is really successful right now are the NBA Top Shots of the world, right? This Dapper Labs group out of Vancouver, which I think is a Muslim founder at the top of it. They're to join any of their NFT projects, like, you know, now they have NFL all day. They just launched one with the UFC. They have a La Liga NFT. They have one coming out with cricket this week, and then NBA as an example. Because I think the biggest hurdle to the NFT space is actually in the very weird process of attempting to buy an NFT with ETH, right? With Ethereum. And I think that that's where the process to entry for most normal people, where they get stuck. Whereas if you can pay with fiat currency to buy an NFT, and there's gamification involved in it, or you're buying it, people have been buying things for video games for years, like billions and billions of dollars for products within video games. So why would it be surprising that NFTs would be another layer? And then I think another part of it is also the democratization of collectibles, right? Whereas before, you used to have to, like, it would take a baseball trading company to come in, have a license deal with Major League Baseball, et cetera, to make printed cards. Well, now that you're not printing anything, that's accessible to all artists. So very multi-layered.
Yeah, so NFT is quite like insanely deep, right? Because initially when I first kind of looked at it, I'm seeing these kind of like, you know, these pixel art kind of NFTs going quite viral, and, you know, apes and all this kind of funky business going on. And maybe just like a rewind for listeners that may not be familiar with what the term NFT means. It means non-fungible token. And the idea is that if you own an NFT, you own like an original piece of thing, whatever that thing may be. So that thing could be art, as Dustin mentioned, but it can also serve a function. So, for example, some of the most popular NFT projects are essentially building blocks. So a building block can have a function. For example, it could be water, it could be gas, it could be air in this kind of virtual space, and those NFTs could be, you know, you could buy 100 blocks in a building, for example, and that building has its own function. So now you partly own, let's say, some of this building space in the metaverse that can generate actual value, whether it's being used by brands, organizations, artists, whoever. So it's a completely like different recipe of doing things. But also, I think what's really important about NFTs is the idea of ownership and originality, which is like built into the kind of the core kind of foundation of it, which is why it's attracting artists so much, who would often, you know, you can publish some artwork online, and minutes later it can be downloaded as a JPEG or a PNG, whatever, and it's being reshared, and, you know, anyone can claim to own it and have their profile picture. Whereas an NFT essentially assigns that kind of ownership to that person, and of course someone can still kind of copy and paste and take a screenshot or whatever it is, but it doesn't change the fact that the real ownership is the real ownership. One of the interesting things, Dustin, for me is getting to terms with, I mean, and this is kind of like true for anything, but like the value being assigned to things. I think that's what's throwing off a lot of people right now, right? Where, you know, in this real world, obviously, you know, a car has a set value, right? Like a 2005 Honda Civic, for example, has like a set market value or range that it falls within, right? Whereas what we're seeing here in this new kind of realm is things that seemingly don't actually have a value, have like a crazy number attached to them, right? So now we've got these gorilla ape NFTs and all sorts of animal NFTs going on. And there's like 1,000 of them, and they're like a limited 1,000. What do you think is driving the value for these things? What's making these things valuable to people?
Well, it's scarcity primarily, right? And that's why the things that have like one of ones, and if you think about it, it's like old school. I think baseball cards, basketball cards, football cards are a great example of it, right? I'm old enough that I grew up in that world, right? I remember my father, I wanted a pair of Jordans. I grew up in the 90s, and to age myself, right, I think they were Jordan 3s. That's how old I am. And believe it or not. And I wanted it, and my dad was like, no way. That's insane. But I had been buying baseball cards little by little, and so I was able to save up enough money through flipping a bunch of baseball cards to then go buy my first pair of Jordans, right? But similarly, like this same world, the big disruption here is the rarity, because those baseball cards, the ones that are still worth money, are the ones that weren't printed in mass. Whereas when basketball cards got really popular, they were printing, you know, 100,000 cases a year of those things, because they were just selling them at Walmart and selling them at wherever, whatever big store you could buy it at. And so what gives the things value now is the rarity of them. So if you say, like, a great project that we're featuring on our Global Muslim startup list is the women in, what's it called? Sorry, the women in, I want to get it right. The Women Rise, right? Women Rise is a really amazing project founded by Muslim sister Maliha Abadi. She's based in London, and they had a rarity of basically she created all these drawings of women, and then within the NFTs there were one of one NFTs that you could get, right? So of famous women activists throughout history, like Malala, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There were one of ones, and those one of ones are worth like tens of thousands of dollars or whatever, right? And she sold out of her collection within 2 months, and she made $6 million selling NFTs. And so that's one of the amazing things about it as well, is like, if you think about it, this is an artist, a graphic designer, who was probably sitting there struggling to make money for years, like most graphic designers, most artists, right? Maybe they're making, 50, 60 max, 100, 150, $200,000 a year. And then all of a sudden she makes upwards of $6 million in 2 months. And she's giving like 10% of of the profits to charity. But I think, again, the basketball cards analogy, to go deeper, is a great example of why this stuff is valuable. The problem with the card industry today, even though it's worth more than it's ever been, like to collect basketball cards, baseball cards, is worth, some of these things, like they're LeBron James cards that are worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars now, right? But the problem with the basketball card is you get it, and the thing, like in the printing itself, the printing can be messed up. Then you take it out of the pack, and you could mess it up in handling the card. And then to get it graded, you have to put it in a sleeve, mail it off somewhere else in the world, with the possibility of it getting lost or stolen. Then that entity grades it, sends it back to you, and its value is based on the grade that they gave you. That process can take
Mm.
3 to 5 months. Whereas if you're buying a video moment on NBA Top Shot, they'll tell you got, number 2 out of 90 of this video moment, and there'll only be 90 of these NFTs printed ever. And you're not, and the value of it is based on you never having to touch it. It's all within digital space, and in many ways it's a form of currency, and like just high net, it's a values high value asset at this point, right? And so, but it's an example of how the basketball card industry got disrupted completely by this overnight, because of the mundane nature of collecting these things, right? And I think that the same thing will happen to where NFTs are right now, because to buy an NFT today, you have to figure out what project you want to buy and what project you think will actually grow. Then you have to go on that website and mint it. You have to put Ethereum or Solana in a wallet. Then you have to connect that wallet to the website, which is a very somewhat of a complex process that you're buying it at. And then at the very end, there are these gas fees where you may not even know how much the gas fees are to buy the thing. Like I was trying to buy the Adidas NFT because these corporate NFTs are doing really, really well. And I went in to buy it and I had about $900 in ETH in my wallet. And then the full price for something that was supposed to cost $800 was $1,500, almost twice the price with the gas. But then, of course, the thing mooned right away and was worth almost $3,000 as soon as it was printed. But the mundane nature of printing that, the complex nature of doing that, I think that's where NFTs are going to be stuck right now. And it's the organizations and the groups who will create workarounds for that, and some real world experiences tied to them are the ones that will go ahead. And the Adidas one is a good example of that, because not only did you get the Adidas NFT, but there were 4 different products that you got that they're releasing throughout a year also. And so like with each product drop that you're sent, if you own the NFT loses some value because you will have taken one of those 4 products. Whereas if you don't take any of the products, the NFT is still worth what it's worth, right? So it's the NFT tied to something in the real world.
What's fascinating is that there's obviously a growing population of people who are prepared to invest money into these projects. That's what's kind of like throwing me off a little bit, right? Like, as in, it's like, fine, there's value there, but there's always been value. There's always been rare things, right? There's always been diamonds, for example. There's always been gold. There's always been, like you said, even baseball cards, for example, right? What do you think is the shift that's happened in the last like few years for people to make this leap into investing serious amounts of money? Like you just said, for example, $1,500 for an Adidas NFT. What's happened in people's minds for people to now make this jump and start thinking, okay, I'm going to purchase something which is still ultimately just like a digital thing, right? It's still ultimately, at worst, it's bragging rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think's created the demand for this?
Well, I would say it's the growth of crypto and people who have cryptocurrency and invested early in cryptocurrency and made a bunch of money last year and were really, ahead in their investments. That's what I think drove some of it initially. And then there's these entire investment funds just focused on Web3, right? And we're only talking about one small part of this, right? If you think about Web3 and what the metaverse is, it's virtual reality, it's augmented reality, it's NFTs, it's cryptocurrency, it's blockchain. And then there's the piece of it that I'm really interested in as a creative as well, which is virtual production components. So like if you've seen the Mandalorian is one of the first examples, and the film The Lion King, the live action version of The Lion King, quote, live action version of The Lion King, were filmed on these virtual sets, right? Where they're not on location. They're shooting on sound stages, but the entire locations are on these like super high resolution screens behind them,
Screens,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
and all of this. So yeah. So anyway, sorry, I got distracted. One of the kids tried to come in.
That's fine. That's fine. So as a Muslim artist, and someone who, you collaborate with artists and you kind of talk to them and stuff, how do you see Muslims being able to maximize the benefit of this new space and this new era almost of metaverse and NFTs?
Well, I think it's just and it's bigger than that too, right? I think there's real world opportunities as well, because like in the U.S., I know you live in California now, right? And one of the things, if you drive around this part of the world, which me and my family did, to go visit family in Denver, we drove, and in New Mexico and in Denver now and in Las Vegas, there's this entity called Meow Wolf, right? And Meow Wolf is this creative, interactive art museum space. And then there's all these pop-ups happening all over, right? And so there's just art happening everywhere, and art is happening in a way where it wasn't before. I think the accessibility of production is what blew this thing up, right? The ease of creating things on your phone, films on your phone, like really high quality. You can get a cinematic quality camera for $1,000 right now, right? You have the right team together, you can make a film. You can create a pop-up. You can take over a building and create an entire immersive experience. Then let alone like everything happening in the digital space. And the big thing that I'm excited about NFTs, if it keeps going, is I think that it'll fund even more art, right? It's the type of thing where if you know anything about venture capital, is that, or being early in a company, what that does, being early in a company does, is if you get an exit, that whole group of early founders and early employees at a company turns around and is able to invest and spend their money in the projects that they're already passionate about. So if you have artists making a bunch of money, then we're inevitably only going to get more art. And so to me, that's a really great thing. And I think, the world is changing as well with funding towards Muslim artists and art projects, and there's so much need, right? We need Muslim museums, Islamic museums, we need film festivals, everything, right? That are about us being our full selves, and also not within the confines and context of what Western liberalism says we should be.
Right now, like for example, I've been kind of keeping a close eye to the Muslim NFT space and stuff. Let's call it Islamic art or Islamic NFT art, right? I'm not currently seeing the same kind of high value projects that may exist, for example, like the apes, for example, the Bored Apes Club and stuff, right? That doesn't seem to be happening just yet. And I wonder what you think the reason for that is, and what Muslims as a wider community need to do to be able to kind of increase these projects' values, right? And just to kind of like add one more thing to that as well. In my experience so far, in my research, kind of looking at these NFT projects, there seems to be a very strong and distinctive community that's built around NFT projects. So it's not the case that, for example, just some dude who's just pumping out NFTs and they're going for millions. It's only really the ones that have built a community and identity around their art, even pre-NFT days, that are kind of getting that maximum value. How do Muslim artists create that for themselves in order for their projects to kind of be successful?
Well, and you asked me about value, right? A lot of the value for these projects is also just around hype. So like Steph Curry wears, what do they have now? It's like the something ape basketball league that's not even the Bored Apes. It's a different type of ape. That's this virtual basketball league they're creating. He wears a hoodie after a game, and he's interviewed in it, and all of a sudden the price of those things goes crazy, right? So much of the value is also just hype. So who would be the Muslim artist that could create that type of hype? If you think about it, we have famous artists, and we have mostly famous artists who are actors and actresses at this point, some influencers, but if you think of like pure artists, I have a hard time thinking of famous living Muslim artists, right? One of the most famous Muslim artists in the world is probably El Cid. If El Cid did an NFT project, there would be a ton of hype around it because it's El Cid, and maybe he's thinking about it, right? But would it have the level of hype that some of these other projects have? And again, I think it's the issue of utility. How do you create something that's really unique that has either virtual utility or real world utility? And if you don't have those things, like you said, and you don't create a community, and that's why Women Rise did so well, is because they created this really strong Discord community, but then they got the hype. So they got to a certain point, they funded, like they said they were going to, at a certain point, they were going to give like 7% of the project to the Malala Foundation. They did that, right? You make a huge donation to something like the Malala Foundation, you're going to get press attention.
Yeah.
So the press attention leads to celebrities tweeting it and whatever else, and then the project closes within 2 weeks because it blows up. So it's all about community and then hype, and then the missing piece that so many artists and even digital strategists don't think of is there's a very real reality to PR. You have to know how to play the PR game well and to get press outside of social media about your work. And if you do that, then stuff blows up.
I feel like there's a lot of ground laying and infrastructure that needs to be done within the Muslim community, because obviously it's happening within the tech space, it's happening within the kind of more, I don't like using the term mainstream, but like mainstream artists and designers and so on and so forth, and fashion influencers and so on and so forth, that are able to obviously have and build an identity around that. And there's a community that's consuming their content, right? Whereas, for example, with Muslims, I don't feel like we've got that demand just yet. And I think that's a demand that needs to be kind of engineered in a way to tell Muslims that, look, this is potentially a way to change the future for Muslims by kind of bringing this economy away from like dollars and pounds and into Ethereum and Bitcoin and all the other stuff that will truly actually liberate our projects, right? And allow us to fund things in more efficient and effective ways, minus gas fees. So I feel like at first we need to kind of obviously develop that kind of community understanding and awareness, which is why like I've been dedicating, I think, 3 podcasts now. We've discussed NFTs and the metaverse and all this kind of stuff, because it's a reality that's dawning on us, right? And we need to kind of move fast. And I feel like as Muslims, we're always late to the party, right? We always turn up like, 20 years late to a new platform, a new medium, and say, hey guys, like here's a halal Muslim version of it. I feel like that's different this time. I feel like, for example, Muslims, especially millennial Muslims, because we're so our ears are so close to the ground in general when it comes to tech and development, that we're picking this up. But essentially where the bulk of the money still lies is in the elder generation, the ones that are still funding the mosques being built, the ones that are still funding projects, and the same uncles and aunties that we go to whenever we need 10,000 things printed, you know what I mean, right? So it's almost like I feel like they themselves also need that education and kind of onboarding into this new paradigm, so that they're the ones that can then successfully pass that wealth downwards to the future generation of decentralized Muslims. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that, and again, the issue is accessibility, right? It's that there's debates about crypto within the Muslim community, so therefore it's not as widely spread as it is maybe in some other communities, even amongst the youth. And then there's debates about art within the Muslim community itself, right? And types of art.
That's true.
And
Yeah,
so
that's true.
when there's ikhtilaf, when there's difference of opinion on issues amongst the Muslims, it's always going to be a bit more difficult to work on some of these things. And so, and that's why I think what would be most successful would also be projects that don't just take the Muslim market into account, right? That you're building things for broader consumers as well. Like, I think that Muslims were interested in Muslim-y things, but not exclusively, right? We're also interested in the broader issues of art and humanity and things like that. And so I think that they're the most successful artists, even like Women Rise, as an example. Yeah, there were like hijabis within that art set, but it wasn't only hijabis. It wasn't only Muslim women. It was like women of color focused Discord channel where you're like championing women being involved in it. And so I think it's the Discord, but it's also whoever has the right project, right? The whoever has the right roadmap and something that's deeper, right? That's the issue, right? Right now, all I'm seeing individual artists sell their art. I'm seeing some charity organizations trying to make some money off of NFTs, but there's no like real roadmap there as to like a project, right? Whereas if you study what they did with Women Rise, she had a whole roadmap. She had a roadmap with, like I said, charity will be given when we sell this many, and then this many, and then she was expecting that thing to go on for like a year. It looked like, and then the whole thing sold out in 2 months. And so she accomplished her entire roadmap, and then now she has to write a roadmap for part two, right?
A second thing that I think needs to be developed, and I think you just touched on it as well, and I think this will play like a very critical role for Muslims to be persuaded to start spending their money in this way, is linking it to charities, because obviously we know that across the board in America and Europe and other places, that Muslims, compared to the rest of the population, are much more generous when it comes to giving charity, right? Ultimately, because it comes down to the fact that it's part of our faith to give charity. And I think that combining NFT projects with being able to support charitable work and Muslims around the world would be a huge way of opening that door for people to be like, okay, yes, it's complicated downloading MetaMask and setting up my Bitcoin wallets and all this stuff, right? But it'll be worth it in the end, knowing that, okay, this money is not only going to charities, but that money has the potential of increasing in value for those charities. And it has like a long-term benefit. And each time that this NFT is traded, potentially a cut will be going to a charitable cause. And I guess one of the gaps that also needs to be filled is Muslim charities, being able to now enter this space of cryptocurrency and DeFi, and being able to kind of set these systems up in place where they're able to be recipients of charitable funds, right? And I don't think there is anyone out there doing that at the moment. They might probably be working on it. And I'll be sure to have some conversations with our own brand partners that are charities and asking them, look, this is something you guys need to look into. But it's all very new at the moment. And I think that's what's making people a bit kind of hesitant. My only fear is how slow we are to kind of adopt this technology. I feel like the number of years that we're slow to pick it up is how much we'll be behind as a community in influencing this kind of new era of the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. But I think at the same time, like to go back to this, the global Muslim most innovative 100 most innovative companies list. So we have a section called blockchain and metaverse startups. And so to give credit where credit's due, there are a number of companies in the space already led by Muslims who are trying to build in the space right now. Many of them need funding, but many of them already have funding in place. So let me just talk about a couple of them real quick, because I think it's a great example. So there's Clever Harvest, which is works between California and Tunisia. And it started as an olive oil project, but they have a brilliant technologist behind the project named Daniel Afzal with their co-founder Soraya Hosni, a good friend of mine who lives in Tunisia with her husband Mark Gonzalez. Shout out to Mark Gonzalez and everyone there. But anyway, they started with focusing on supply chain with food, and then putting blockchain technology related to supply chain. So that's huge, right? And it's an example of showing where and they're looking specifically at these foodstuffs that have the most need traceability, right? So olive oil, coffee, cacao, and avocado industries are where they're starting using blockchain technology. Then, of course, we mentioned Women Rise. Then there's Funun, based between Dubai and the UK, founded by Shah Sheikh and Mohammed Imran. And to go back, real quick on Clever Harvest, they already closed a pre-seed deal, and now they're raising a multi-million-dollar seed. So, mashallah. Women Rise raised $6 million through NFTs, unless they didn't cash it out, and the ETH went way down last week, right? Funun is raising a pre-seed, but they're actually trying to build a faith-inspired NFT marketplace. The key there is going to be obviously the projects that are behind it. Then there's Marhaba DeFi, which is based in Sydney, and they've raised a bunch of money, and they have their own coin, and their Marhaba is focused on the Islamic finance liquidity pool, and they're trying to create DeFi technology related to that. And then Shisha Finance is focused on DeFi, specifically in the Arab world, and they've already raised $9.4 million as a seed. And so those are the companies we featured. And then there's, like I said, all these different projects with artists. And so you have things like Husbullah, right? Husbullah has like an NFT project with thousands of Husbullahs. The famous Russian
the
Dagas.
only one and only Hezbollah.
Yeah, the one and only Hezbollah at this point. No Hezbollah, right? We've moved past our political stage, and everything is influencers now. Anyway, so Hezbollah has a project, and he has a really. I'm on their Discord, so and that's the big thing. Discord, just diving into Discord is super interesting as well. And if you want to find out about NFT projects, you need to go into the Discord, see how active the communities are, and that'll show you why. As an example, we don't have our projects in place yet. We don't have super active Discords, and you can tell. And when we see that, then a project will pop because it has enough people behind it.
And how big are these Discord servers, the ones that are popping?
I mean, like the NBA Top Shot one is hundreds of, like 100,000, right? And so, but that's a huge one. They have an NFL project that's not nearly as big. It's like 7,000. But like even there is, and then there's another one we mentioned, but there's a group called the Digital Sisterhood who have a podcast. I don't know if you know them. I think they're UK based, but they're launching an NFT project. They started originally as a podcast, and they have a pretty active Discord, but right now there's only like 20 people on it who are active. So maybe not as active as I thought, but growing. I'm trying to find the Women Rise one. Women Rise have 400 people who are holding Women Rise that are part of the Discord. So that means 400 people just holding the art, let alone other people who are in it. And those are people holding it. Those are people holding it, not selling it. So.
Okay. Cool, because I think what's quite important here, and I'm sorry, listeners, if you're listening to this podcast and you're completely confused as to what we're talking about, and I'm hoping that a lot of this makes sense, and if it doesn't, please just like Google these terms that we're talking about, because and I say this, like, my wife thinks I'm going crazy, by the way. She thinks like, why are you so worried about all this stuff? It's not really going to happen. I'm like, listen, I need to buy an Oculus Quest. I need to now get used to the idea that people are going to be wearing goggles. And as a content creator, I now need to start creating content in this virtual space. That's just like a reality that I have to deal with, right? Yes, it would be ideal just to keep making websites in WordPress for the rest of my life and only using Photoshop. But no, the technology is evolving. Culture is evolving. And of course, we need to kind of adapt with the time. And especially for the sake of our children, right? Like, we need to be pioneers in this space in order for our children to have a secure future in it. Otherwise, we're going to be leaving it to people with ill intentions that can very easily now capture our children's imagination and thought process and everything, because the power of virtual reality is going to be that much more intense than what phones are doing right now. And there's no escaping that, unfortunately. It would be nice to just live in a village and just say, hey, I'm done with this stuff. I'm just going to look at a tree all day. And so the reason why, like, it's important for me to keep having these conversations on this podcast now is really, I'm seeing it as my own kind of like personal mission almost, to try and create more content and conversations about this, start exploring ideas with people like yourselves who I know are actively involved and partaking in these conversations, because that's how we're all going to learn and that's how we're all going to benefit. Dustin, I know you're quite busy at the moment because you've got the launch of this Global Muslim Startups List 2022. And you got a phone call in 10 minutes. So just before you go, I thought it'd be cool for you to kind of share a little bit more information with our listeners as to what that is, what inspired the project, what they can expect in the next couple of weeks or months.
Sure. So the big thing for us is really about building connections with and an ecosystem for Muslim entrepreneurs, the same way I've done that work for a long time for Muslim activists. We have to build the space ourselves, and so what we launched the first list in 2015. We featured 50 companies. the second list in 2016 where we featured 50 companies, and then the third list in 2017 was focused on apps. So in total, we featured about 125 companies. And what's really amazing is those set of companies were groups like Launch Good, Muslim Vibe, uh, Noor Kids, and some of those companies like Launch Good now have 100 employees around the world. Some of these companies have made millions and millions of dollars and raised tens of millions of dollars in venture capital money. But what's even more amazing now is that in 2022, we created this list with 100 companies all around the world. And these companies have raised collectively closer to $300 million just in venture capital money, let alone in philanthropic funds. And so it shows the growth of the space. It shows the maturity of the space. Even in those earlier lists, there was no real Islamic fintech as an example. Fintech in 2015 and 2016, like digital banking, neo-banking, robo investing, all this stuff was happening already, and it wasn't happening for Muslims. And to your point, many years later, here come the Muslims, and now on this list, I think we have 10 digital banks all around the world, like 2 in the United States, 1 in Canada, a couple in Europe, like Insha, which is based in Berlin. There's a couple like Cardus is a equity crowdfunding platform based in the UK. So there's just so many really amazing companies doing really cool work. Of course, the problem with banking is the banking system itself. And then we're very interested, and part of the reason I'm interested in this work is I'm also very interested in narrative change and how we change the story about Muslims, how we quit being reactionary in our storytelling, how we tell stories that are looking towards the future. And I think that these companies are a great example of that. And so the beginning of the list is actually media companies. And part of the reason for that is our lead sponsor was a group based in Los Angeles called Us Hub, but also because that's one of my passions and I work in media production as well. And I think it's where we need the most change, right? Like I have 4 young girls, and seeing the type of content that they're consuming all the time, we have to create high quality content. Not to say it's all bad or anything like that, right? I wouldn't talk bad about them. It's the issue of, do we understand all the messages that are built into even some of the children's content, right? And not talking about Fred Rogers and Daniel Tiger and these beautiful examples of values-based storytelling that still exist in some places, talking about some of the more negative stuff. But anyway, so there's a really amazing group of companies like True and Living, founded by the amazing poet Amir Suleiman, who has a couple TV shows that he's working on and films. We talk about Khabib and kind of the global empire that Khabib is building through media and sports, and the set of companies like he just bought a MMA organization called Eagles FC that was based, I think, in Uzbekistan, and then he globalized it and is having his first event in the U.S. at the end of this month, right? While building a school in the UAE that teaches for underrepresented kids, that teaches them how to play football and how, global football, not American football, and MMA, while also giving them a really quality education. We have groups like Muslim Casting that are just focused on helping Muslims connect to casting opportunities so that we have actual good representation. Like Malala Yousafzai has her own production company and has a deal with Apple Plus for children's content and animation and dramas and documentaries. Left-handed, right? Riz Ahmed's production company. So many amazing companies, right? And so that's why we do it. It's one thing. We'll see an article about one of these companies and we're like, oh, subhanAllah, that's nice that this person's doing that or whatever. And then you see it as a collective, and it gives us real hope, right? Is like, how do we see hope in the future that we're building together? And so even like the metaverse stuff we were just talking about, we could have said, oh, there's no hope. No one's doing it. But like I was able to say right in the middle of the conversation, no, here's 5 startups that already have major investments that are doing it. And even like some of the research, like this week, I found a company that wasn't going to be included. It's actually the model Bella Hadid's company, who's been more public recently about her kind of Muslimness and their Palestinian background. And I know her father is a billionaire investor in Los Angeles, and so she created this drink company called Ken Euphorics, and she's been marketing it, talking about kind of what alcohol did to her life, and now being sober for almost a year now, and what it means to create a drink that's non-alcoholic that can, for those people who are dealing with alcohol addiction and want to stop, that can be a replacement for them. And as someone who converted to Islam, definitely had a similar journey. And I think so many of it, and even people born Muslim, have that journey today. So that's why we include social impact companies, spiritual impact companies, and companies, like this within food and beverage. There's even the most hilarious one was, there was this Muslim company, this Muslim guy on Shark Tank. He has a company called Snacklands, and he has this great line on Shark Tank where he says, "I'm a Muslim American pitching a vegan pork rind on Shark Tank." Right? His company, he created a vegan pork rind because he wanted to eat pork rinds, and he couldn't as a Muslim. and then he got a deal with Mark Cuban. I'm like, that's hilarious, right? It's hilarious to me.
Yeah.
So, mashallah. So that's
there is definitely like this boom that I'm seeing over the last like few years of Muslim startups, but also these Muslim startups becoming a lot more sophisticated, not just slapping the Muslim label in front of something and saying, "Here, look, here's the Muslim version of it." I especially like what's happening in the fintech space, and I've definitely been seeing a lot more kind of movement happening in this kind of like blockchain space as well, right? And for example, I think it's called Bitfinex or something like this. I can't remember the exact name, but it's run by a Muslim brother from London. And they've recently got like, I think a serious funding of like $10 million or something like that. And I'm seeing a lot of this kind of like inspiring movement take place. And, it's something that I'm so kind of keen to just keep like exploring and finding out more and more about. So that's why I'm really looking forward to when you do publish this article with the list for 2022. And yeah, that'll be amazing to just kind of go through each one of those lists and see what's taking place around the world. It's just a very inspiring time at the moment.
Yeah, totally. And it's also super interesting that a lot of the like innovative startup stuff is happening in the US and the UK, and right, it's still happening globally. There's a lot of companies from Southeast Asia, some companies from Istanbul in the Middle East, and of course with language stuff, maybe some of those things aren't accessible to us, or we don't have the right networks. But it just shows that you can build a company like LaunchGood for a global Muslim audience today and work wherever you want in the world to reach that audience, right? And so, yeah, inshallah, man, super inspiring stuff. And thank you for having me. And everybody, good luck with the NFT game. Like I said, I think the big change, the hard question when so many people involved in it were big crypto heads, is going to be, what's more important, crypto or NFTs? Because I don't know that they'll grow together, and one is probably bigger than the other, and I don't think it's crypto. so yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But
that's a whole other conversation indeed. I'll be working on an NFT project this year, inshallah. Just out of creative curiosity more than anything. And inshallah, you'll be someone that I'll be in touch with a lot to discuss updates, and maybe I'll invite you to the Discord server and we can start building something there.
Of course.
But no, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Dustin. We're due to speak soon again personally, and I can't wait to have more conversations with you. You're in San Diego. I'm in the middle of a desert, but inshallah, we can definitely touch base in person and have a more deeper conversation about all of this.
That's the only affordable place to live in California, is deep within the desert. You have to get 40 miles from the ocean to even have a place.
even this place is getting expensive, but no, this place has its own unique charm, man. Like the desert, the Joshua trees, and the mountain views. It's alhamdulillah, it's a beautiful space.
All right, man. Yeah, beautiful. We'll have to see each other soon, inshallah. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
That was our conversation with Dustin. I hope you guys found it beneficial and informative. And again, I apologize in advance if someone's listening to this podcast and has no idea what we're talking about. But I do definitely recommend that everyone does a little bit of research on these terms: NFT, metaverse, blockchain, crypto, all this stuff. All the information is pretty much out there available. You just need to run a quick Google search and essentially find an article or a video that attracts you the most and start learning about these things. I found it quite inspiring to see Dustin's confidence in the future for Muslim creatives. He's definitely someone who has his ear close to the ground and knows the ins and outs of what people are working on and the different projects that are taking place at the moment. So it's very, very encouraging to speak to him and know that there's people working on these things, right? He is going to be releasing a report from the Center for Global Muslim Life, looking at the top Muslim startups of 2022 to keep an eye on. And when that's available, be sure to check it out. The best way to do that would be visiting the website globalmuslimlife.com. Follow them on social media, and then as soon as the report is published, which at the time I'm going to release this episode, it probably will be, and then you'll see all the links and stuff like that on the social medias and stuff. That's it from us. I just wanted to let you guys know about a project that we'll be working on this year, My Muslim Family. I think I've brought it up in previous episodes. That's going to be starting fairly soon, and this is a project that's going to be aimed at Muslim parents, looking at the issues of raising a Muslim family that's got a strong Muslim identity, and providing practical solutions to the modern challenges that Muslim parents are facing. So I would like you to please check it out. Go to mymuslimfamily.org. We have a landing page up at the moment where you can join our mailing list, and once you join that mailing list, you can then download our presentation, which kind of gives a full kind of deep dive into the project. And you will also start getting updates from us as to when we're going to slowly release little things. So we're going to be starting with a podcast, articles, so on and so forth. Anyways, if you've made it this far into the podcast, thank you a bunch. Really, really appreciate it. Leave us a comment underneath. Let us know what you thought of the podcast. If you have any questions about NFTs, and we'll be happy to respond and help you with any questions. That's it from me, guys. Barakallah feek. See you next week, or maybe more than a few weeks, depending on our video editor's ability to edit this podcast in time. Salam.